I can't see how it could be done. I may be wrong. He may be a new type of fellow, much smarter than any of us. And if he is, good luck to him.
He's very sharp, very quick, very entertaining, charming. He's a gambler, an inveterate gambler.
He is like a breath of fresh air. In this building, in Fleet Street, in the printing industry, particularly in the newspaper world. And by Christ, it's long overdue.
He's a very hard worker. Tycoon's a sort of Americanism. He's a good Australian businessman who's come here. I'm going to show you how to do it.
Murdoch took over the News of the World in January. Since then, its circulation has risen by more than 500,000. This old family business just off Fleet Street is now his power base in the newspaper world. The last 9 months have been spent money-making and gingering up the style of the paper itself.
Twisting Keeler. And the line I'm proposing to take on it is the storm of the book and people who are trying to get it stopped and all the rest of it. It's going to be a great story, this. Mr. Murdoch, I don't know if you've got any views about it.
Yes, I think that we've got to lead with it, obviously. And this is some tremendous news. But I think the line in it, either on a page one editorial or in the introduction early, is to answer this controversy, is to say, forgive the individuals by all means, but you can't forget it.
Yeah.
And take it, and say, are these people proposing that the history, everyone who writes history and future is never going to mention this incident?
Well, of course.
So we should take the offensive, in other words, about this and this
Sure.
controversy, and if it keeps it boiling for 6 weeks, so much the better.
Well, the editorial will start with this on page one, and there'll be opinion in it, and also the story of the row. So it's going to get a big show, and then turn inside, where she starts off her life, which will start from the beginning and go right through. I think it's going to be great.
Do you have any qualms about that as muckraking and going over an old scandal that should be dead and buried by now?
No, certainly not. And it shouldn't be dead and buried either. It's unfortunate thing for Mr. Perfumer, but we can. It's not all about him by any means. It's about the girl, and the story of this girl, which is not an uninteresting story at all. We can forgive Mr. Perfumer. We can do what we can to see that he's rehabilitated, because he has tried very hard. By all means, forgive the individual, but you can't forget it.
You see, what worries people is, I think there was a comment of yours on this, and it may be inaccurate, but it was a quote, that you said people can sneer as much as they like, but I'll take the 150,000 copies we're going to sell. And I believe you're now going to sell in printing at 200,000. It suggests that you are, in fact, lining your pocket with rather sleazy material.
Well, I don't agree it's sleazy, for a minute. Nor do I agree that it is unfair to the man or anything else. As I say, one has the greatest sympathy with him, but it doesn't alter the fact that everybody knows what happened. Certainly it's going to sell newspapers, and there'll be other stories we'll put in which will sell newspapers. We're not ashamed of that.
Murdoch's first London home is in a fashionable square near Hyde Park. Anna, his second wife, was originally a reporter on one of his Australian newspapers. She settled down somewhat uneasily to English life with her one-year-old daughter. She is, however, quite capable of coping with the tricky job of being wife to an ambitious man.
I think that being the wife of a tycoon anyway must be awful, really. I mean, it must be very lonely, and you must feel very much cut out a lot of the time of his life and what he's doing.
Well, first of all, I don't like him being called a tycoon. And secondly, it is awful sometimes, and it is lonely, and you are cut out of it. But I don't think I change it for anything at all. And I think newspapers are in his blood. He's fascinated by them, by the presses rolling, seeing it on the street, watching what other people read. He watches people on the trains. He catches the tube in the morning. And he doesn't take the papers. He's read them all here. And he sits in a little corner, I think, and watches the dolly birds in London with their mini skirts and all the men, and I hope, and what they're reading. And he notices what they're reading, or if we walk past somebody in the street, he says, "Is he carrying a News of the World?" That I think is quite funny, and it's rather embarrassing to go with him to a newsagent's shop, because he always rearranges the layout of the papers. If his papers aren't on top, while I'm talking, he's shuffling away at the other side, putting the News of the World at front.
Do you read the News of the World?
Yes, every Sunday.
What do you think of it?
It's very good.
But it doesn't upset you at all. It doesn't worry you that
Oh, why
it's that
should it?
kind of paper.
I'm very proud of it. I think it's a very pretentious sort of thing to say.
A recent profile of you said that you were a brash, you belong to the brash, masculine, Australian tradition, which allows women to play only a subordinate and retiring role. Is that how you see yourself?
Well, I think it's quite wrong about women. Brash, I don't know, judge for yourself. Said I was an athletic Australian. I'm afraid that's far from the truth.
What do you do as a sort of antidote to the newspaper world? How do you sleep?
Walk. In Australia, farm. I've got a farm, which I'm very fond of.
You don't realise that there's a great deal of iron behind the boyish exterior, and he's a very tough proprietor who, I think, in the course of the period we're at the Australian, sacked more journalists than I think I'd ever seen sacked before in my whole career. He's a tremendous sacker, but of course he's also a tremendous hirer. So he's always sacking them and hiring them.
I'm not a great sacker, no. I'm a very bad sacker. This is, because there were two well-known cases in Australia of editors whom I'd given immense freedom to and made quite names for themselves. They ended up making such names for themselves, they're spending their time giving speeches everywhere instead of editing. And we did come to a stage of parting with both of them. I certainly didn't enjoy it.
People always say they don't enjoy it, and I always have a suspicion that underneath it there is a kind of pleasure in being powerful enough to sack someone, just as the pleasure of being powerful enough to hire someone.
No. The first person I ever fired, I remember. I went and took him and walked him around the park, and I think I ended up in tears instead of him. No, it's a horrible thing. Horrible thing.
So far, it's been all dash and dazzle.
Beautiful, Christine.
The plan is to print both papers here on the same machines with much the same crews. Murdoch has confidently said that union negotiations must be over 8 days from now. But as the deadline gets nearer, it looks as though Murdoch may be unable to drive the bargain he wants. The unions, though secretive about the talks, don't mind discussing the man.
When I first met Murdoch, it was in connection with the Sun, and he never gave me the impression of being a knight in shining armour galloping up Fleet Street to save a hourly newspaper. He was just another newspaper proprietor that was interested in taking over a paper because he reckoned it was a winner, he could make some money.
In approaching Mr. Murdoch, we've found that you say your piece distinctly to him, and he always hears first time. You don't have to waffle.
He gives you a direct answer, very quickly, very concisely. He knows where he's going, he gets there double quick. The impression I've got created is that, going back to an old question, he will be a very ruthless chairman eventually. Judging by his elimination of certain members on the board, he seems to be the similar system of the new takeovers.
In this office, anyway, it's Mr. Murdoch for a far better deal than we've had in the past, and we've had a good one in the past. But he's made it abundantly clear to us that he expects to take the chances, and he expects us to take the chances with him.
Murdoch's plans for the Sun are still uncertain. It seems that it'll be a spicier version of the Daily Mirror. The guardians of public morals, they're not the public, are saying they're worried he'll sell it on sex.
Depends what you call by spice and sex and salaciousness and muckraking and so on. So, no, I mean, we're obviously not going to avoid the subject. But it's not going to be a dirty paper, of course not.
I think Rupert, in his new paper, will be appealing largely to D and E class readers.
This means low-income groups.
That's the lower-income groups without too much money to spend, and that is not the kind of readership that attracts a great volume of advertising. I think a paper of that kind must have large circulation to offset the ability to attract the advertising. I think he's going to have a very, very difficult time, and my guess would be that it can't succeed.
It seems to me, you see, that it's very tempting for someone in your position with a new paper to start, to turn it into a salacious scandal sheet, because there's absolutely no doubt that if it were that, it would get a big circulation. How do you resist the temptation?
Well, I doubt very much whether you're right, that it would get a big circulation. You might get one overnight, but it wouldn't stay with you, and you wouldn't have the loyalty of your readers. You wouldn't have people wanting it to go into their homes regularly. You might get people on a street corner buying it quickly, but you wouldn't hold the thing.
Bad newspapers, bad editorial content, I say bad in the way of salaciousness or sensationalism, it tends to drive out good editorial copy. When a newspaper resorts to sex and sensationalism, it's a surefire circulation builder, but it tends to lower the whole tone of the press. Other competing newspapers, mine do not compete, so I'm not talking about my own. Other competing newspapers have to lower their standards as well and go in for that sort of thing to hold their own, or they lose circulation. Now, I think that it'll be a very sad thing indeed if Rupert runs papers here on a basis of sensationalism and sex and those sort of things.
Murdoch believes there's room for another daily, which other paper owners doubt, and he thinks he can get it printed the way he wants, though the unions may put a stop to that. But he's certainly got off to a bold start, and boldness is an essential quality in a man taking the risks he's proposing. Whether it pays off is another matter.
Mr. Murdoch is now taking on a national daily on top of the news of the world. His primary interests are newspapers. And whether this gamble will succeed, I hope for him and the industry that it will succeed, but it remains an extremely complex gamble.
I think he's going to give us probably a better deal than we've had before. I'm not too sure about this, though, at this present moment, because, as I said before, we've only seen one side of Mr. Murdoch at the present moment.
I think Rupert is a very good and tough businessman, and I wish him all success. And if he can turn the Sun profitable, after the Mirror lost £12.5 million, that's a lot of money, and they're pretty smart too, you know. They know pretty well what to do with newspapers. I don't know just how he's going to turn the thing around. Do you?